Gen AI is still in its infancy with a significant potential. What we advise to our clients is to probably go on an awareness phase first, and then on to governance strategy, implementation approach, experimentation, and then eventually realization.
If you look at organizations, right, there are a lot of data points, information that resides in a lot of different documents, a lot of different repositories. And this is definitely one area where we feel Gen AI can truly create the difference, where we can create some sort of a intelligent agent, intelligent bot. The name does not matter.
Hello and welcome everyone to the next episode of the AIM Media House podcast Simulated Reality. Today we have with us leaders from Innover Digital, Amit and Rakesh. Hi Amit and Rakesh, how are you doing today?
Hi, Kashyap. Thank you for having us. It's a pleasure.
Thank you, Kashyap. Glad to be here.
Fantastic. Great. So Amit and Rakesh, we're going to talk about navigating the generative AI revolution from hype to impact, right? My first question to you is, Amit, why did you want to speak on this subject? Let's start there. Like what is it? Why are you so passionate about this subject? And maybe we can then set the context for our audience and then move on to the next questions.
Yeah, look, I think it's such a disruptive technology. Right? Technology have always been disruptive, but generative AI, has a potential of disrupting significantly. It's at very center of what we are doing and the potential impact it can have. And it's obvious for us to be both passionate about it and to be discussing it as much as we can.
Fantastic. Yeah. So one thing that I've always observed is, leaders have said that there is a huge potential around generative AI. So has been said about a lot of technologies, but that hype has died over a period of time. But the same thing has not happened with generative AI, right? One of the reasons is because people are still very much invested in it. There is a lot of investments coming from top down, from the board to the CEOs to the CDOs. But as businesses kind of embark on their journey into the generative AI, how do you think they should approach it? And my question comes from the perspective of people wanting generative AI as opposed to finding a problem statement which generative AI might fit into. I have seen both answers, especially considering the excitement around it and the disruption. But usually, leaders have always proposed find the problem, and if AI fits into it, then you kind of implement AI. But that has not always been the case with Gen AI. So, what are your thoughts on this in terms of the company strategy?
Look, Gen AI is still in its infancy with a significant potential. What we advise to our clients is to probably go on an awareness phase first, and then on to governance strategy, implementation approach, experimentation, and then eventually realization. And let me take a moment talking about each one of them. Look, the technology, the first thing you got to do is you have to have awareness, right? What exactly is the potential, what the pitfalls are, what potential risks are. Once you have the awareness, that's when you can put together the guardrails or the governance around it, right? And as you might have seen in the news, there has been inadvertent misuses of the technology as well, and hence it's important for us to have governance. Once you have it, then you can define the broader strategy of where you are going. You don't define a proper strategy, the disillusionment, if you will, can creep in because there is no ROI. Once you have the strategy, then you can do your implementation approach, and then you can be ready for experimentation. What we typically recommend our clients is to go pick up use cases where you have a well-defined problem statement and what good looks like or what the ROI is. Once you have that, then you can continue to pick up other use cases that are adjacent to have a compounding impact on the overall realization, if you will, of the ROI. But it all starts with awareness and governance, and then it goes down the chain.
Yeah, I think that has been a common theme that I've observed across different, educating the leaders or different stakeholders within companies around what exactly is the potential of generative AI. That also brings me from the perspective of service providers like Innover, right? While you're working with different sets of clients, there's always a different approach and a strategic decision making that goes on at your level, right, Amit and Rakesh? So this question comes from a perspective of understanding whether to understand whether you're building Gen AI from scratch, right? So what I mean by that is Recently, we did a study at AIM Research around LLM economics to identify, the report was called LLM economics, to identify what is the different cost of text-based generative AI application that needs to be deployed. The idea, and we try to identify whether companies should build it completely in-house or should kind of build it on different APIs. There was no definitive answer, obviously, and we spoke to, apart from our doing our own analysis, we also spoke to different leaders to, hosted focused groups to understand a little bit more around that. But the idea was to kind of navigate it depending on different parameters. What are these parameters for you, right? And how do you make a decision on whether to build a LLM or a text-based Gen AI application from scratch, and or build it on APIs, considering so many options coming in? Claude was just released, etc. So your thoughts?
I think it's a great question. My answer is it depends. Several factors come into play. The budget, the time, the expertise that you have in the house, what level of specificity or customization you need, what's your tech stack, right? And of course, the expanse of data, whether it is in-house or an ecosystem outside. Now, for the most part, one thing is, it's a realization is, look, building a large language model grounds up can cost tens of millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, right? And then obviously keeping it running. It's a tall order for most of the companies to put in so much of capital into building a large language model in-house. Having said that, what we have seen is foundational models, and picking them up and then building on top of it is probably a more pragmatic approach if it fits you. Now, fine tuning is obviously one of the most preferred way of inheriting a large language model and fine tuning it in your context. It's far more economical. For example, for training a GPT-3 model, can be done in matter of few weeks at a cost which is probably low single digit $1 million, right? So it's a more pragmatic approach. Now, having said that, the emergence of small language models have gained prominence recently, right? And I believe it will continue to gain more prominence as we go ahead. Now, on one side, you have large language models. They are much more broad-based. On the other hand, small language models are highly context sensitive or context specific, right? You can have a few million parameters for a small language model versus a large language model. And you can use several techniques, right? Knowledge distilling, pruning, and quantization, if you will, and effective architecture, right? So it depends on what you are using for and what your context is. Small language models, obviously, the significant advantage you have is they can work or perform very nicely in the specific context that they are trained in. However, they probably both the accuracy, right, as well as the context dramatically reduces as you go out. So one thing that we advise is to be very careful in the definition of the scope of your small language models. Otherwise, there is a significant compromise. Now, the difference between a small language model, right, and a fine-tuned large language model is, in the large language model, you are obviously, retraining the weights of a model. However, here in a small language model, you are limiting the number of parameters in context of the data set. One advantage of small language model is you can easily deploy them, on mobile devices, and they can still function just fine, given the size of them is much more optimized. So it's summarizing it for you, Kashyap. It depends on your context. Most of the times, I would like to believe that corporations don't need to build large language models grounds up. Small language models, especially trained with synthetic data, can function just fine, or inheriting a large language model and then optimizing it. Both of those, I would like to believe, should address majority of the needs of the clients.
Yeah, very well put. I think that kind of, gives a very pragmatic approach on, decision making based on various factors. One of my questions to you is, what is your observation on what is the maturity level of these different organizations to enable that, right? Maybe we can take some real life examples, but I've always wondered as to where do these organizations stand in terms of being able to actually deploy put large language models or Gen AI into production. One of this comes from also from the perspective of not just the technology, but also the overall org structuring, and some other parameters, non-technical factors that need to be put together, especially if we are to build Gen AI successfully 5 years, 10 years down the line.
So Kashyap, I think this is a very interesting question, right? Because I think all of us, as we speak with our customers and internally as well, right, we're trying to kind of identify those 3 or 4 areas where truly the promise of the technology can meet the reality of what it delivers, right? And I think that is the balance. And as Amit touched upon it in early discussion, if you don't get it right, people will get disillusioned very fast and they will lose interest, right? So how do we keep that, right? So if you look at from our perspective, right, there are 3 key areas where we have seen, and 3 buckets, if I may, right? We have seen a lot of promise, for lack of better term, right? Because yes, still productionization is, some of them are doing it, some of them are still in the journey, right? But there are 3 big areas where we see a lot of value coming, right? One is on-demand information availability, right? So what I mean by this is, if you look at organizations, right, there are a lot of data points, information that resides in a lot of different documents, a lot of different repositories, a lot of different places. And at times, there is a lot of productivity loss where subject matter experts have to go and scour through so many documents, so many places, and truly get that insight to take an action within the organization, right? And this is definitely one area where we feel Gen AI can truly create the difference, where we can create some sort of a intelligent agent, intelligent bot, the name does not matter, but which allows organizations to have on-demand information availability, which is today scattered across a lot of different places, right? And one of the classic examples where we have also started seeing this being evolved is the technology industry, right? So how do we actually make my software engineers more productive? How can they start leveraging this technology to understand what are the best practices of writing the code, how to generate some auto code, how to do some auto QA, right? So that itself is driving a lot of productivity internally, right? So on-demand information availability within the organization, I think, is becoming definitely one area where we have seen a lot of initial excitement come through the promise of the technology Gen AI, right? The second big bucket where there is a lot of potential and we have seen a lot of use cases starting to come in is hyper personalization and end-to-end transactions in real time, right? And this is not just going to be something that Gen AI enables by itself, but it's a combination of generative AI combined with our traditional machine learning models that can come together for us to now deliver truly hyper personalized experiences real time, right? And I think that is another area where we have seen a lot of discussions happening, especially in terms of field service area, customer service area, supply chain visibility, e-commerce platform, where there is a lot of these conversations happening. So that is second bucket where I think there is a lot of promise of the technology. The third one is around intelligent ecosystem and intelligent decision making, right? And independent decision making kind of a model, right? So if you were to kind of think of the promise, right? If we were truly expanding this technology to its fullest capabilities, we can start truly building, auto agents or build in truly intelligent bot that can enable end-to-end, intelligent decision making without a human in the loop, right? All the way from somebody asking you something through an email, from you going ahead and being able to truly understand the context, find the answer, take action on it, publish it, right? And there are different paths in which, this generative AI can evolve, right? It could be going to a complete independent voice enabled applications that our customers are thinking about, right? Or a completely independent auto agent to take care of customer service areas. That's one of the key examples where we see, generative AI kind of expand. But I think the key part, right, is it will never be independent generative AI creating the entire impact, right? It has to be generative AI then tied with other technologies that we already have to our disposable and making the entire ecosystem more automated and more intelligent throughout the life cycle, right? So that's the thought process. I hope this gives you a perspective of where we are looking at different use cases.
No, definitely. I think that answers. I've heard about on-demand information availability as well as hyper personalization. The third one's intelligent bots, where you see potential. How advanced are we, right? And especially in that context, how mature are organizations to adopt that technology in a way that it actually makes an impact at scale? Some of these biggest organizations that have 10,000 employees, etc. And a follow-up question to that as well, right? This will reshape completely how a workplace is, right? Or some of the ways that employees interact, some of the needs for companies to hire the right, the different kinds of employees, and different roles rather. Where do you really stand in terms of this? What is the maturity of these organizations, and what does that mean for the entire workforce to prepare for the orgs?
So look, one thing with every time, a disruptive technology has come in, right? Or transformation has come in, there has always been questions about, well, whether, this will help us as humanity, or it is going to hurt us more. Well, I'm an optimist. I believe that, the human, our ability to adapt, and survive and thrive, right, is always supreme. So I stay very optimistic. I believe Gen AI, while is going to become a very integral part of our society, and the work that we do, I think it will still be aiding the humans rather than disrupting it in a negative way. Now, having said that, I think it is important, going back to some of the previous discussions, Kashyap, we had, is how do we stay relevant, right? As this evolution starts to have. Now that requires, of course, going back to the awareness part, Kashyap, that earlier I was touching on. Driving awareness, right, almost always drive, a positive change in the workforce, right? Now, making conscious steps towards both, right, reskilling, the workforce, you have, as well as, providing opportunities, right, in utilizing the technology for the benefit of the firm, can go a long way. It's just like with every other revolution we have seen. Staying relevant is critical. Investing in yourself, we are a huge proponent, even within the firm, of how do you keep investing in ourselves. I'm a huge proponent of keeping investing in myself in terms of learning and staying relevant with what technology has to offer. I think it starts there. And then, once you have the awareness, once you have the training, right, application of the technology to your advantage, in my opinion, comes naturally. Now, from a specific skill set standpoint, I'll let Rakesh chime in on that.
Thank you, Amit. Right. So, and I think I'll just take the conversation forward. Right. So, if you look at even the software engineering realm as an industry, right, we were anyway seeing disruption coming from low code, no code platform that was saying your ability for programming or your time for program should go down and you should become more aligned to solving the problem, right? And we see that with solutions like Copilot, which are powered by Gen AI, this further will accelerate that. You know what? The team is not going to spend a lot of time actually coding, Kasha, but also thinking about the problem to solve, and then use these assistants to generate code part of it much easier. Is it mature there? No, right? But all of us are seeing leaps and bounds how it can help it, right? So I think from a change, it's a shift in the skill set demand rather than for us to say, hey, no, it completely eliminates that, as Amit said, right? And we as organizations both have to adapt individually to these skills and then continue to evolve on the other side, right? For example, if you really look at even the other industries, right? Be it you are in a healthcare industry, you are in a marketing or a marketing communication industry. With a lot of these Gen AI based solutions, your operational aspect of the task will be done much faster, but you will still need for you to somebody to interpret it better, to drive decision making better, and to be more engaged and giving more personalized experience to your end customers or consumers, right? So the skill set will continue to shift, right? But I think for us, I think it's all trying to make sure we can stay relevant to where the technology is, where interpretation of data, interpretation of insights, and taking actions, that part is still going to be something where a lot of human plus Gen AI interaction will be there for a long time, right? And that's where we see we should continue to train our teams, train our customers to kind of orient towards that, right? Rather than just being focused on I do operational task and that's where I should focus on.
Got it.
That makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. And, automation has always created jobs is something which is not new. We have learned that. But especially with the point that you made with regards to really smart agents with no human in the loops, right? The reason why I wanted to ask you is how practically or what stage we have reached to build this application or put it into production, and what stage are organizations to adopt it as well, is because AI as an even AI as automated thing, the scale has been really huge, right? While there has always been automation, right? We produced engines, we produce assembly lines to kind of improve manufacturing. So it improved jobs and created jobs in different ways. But intelligent automation is something to be always it has probably been a fear of many policymakers, especially from a context of jobs and workplace and how these kind of things work. So, what do you think about that?
Look, I think as as the technology or as the artificial intelligence continue to evolve towards annual, artificial general intelligence, AGI as they call it. Although I personally believe we are still far away from average general intelligence or artificial general intelligence. I think there will always be some level of regulatory oversight that will be needed. I think it's imperative that there has to have some governance being put around and regulations put around it. Any technology, right? Not only this one, and there are several examples in the past that going unchecked, right, or unsupervised can cause significant damage. Right? There are several examples, Kashyap, from the past. So, generative AI to me is no exception to that. There will be some level of oversight will be needed. And look, I think we have seen even in the recent past certain examples, of some of the content that was being created, right, which was both very disturbing, and the firms were obviously, forced to take corrective actions. So I'm a strong believer that there has to be more ethics and regulation over it.
And if I may just add, Kashyap, to what Amit was saying, right? If you look at any business process, right, or any interaction a human has as part of a business process, there are multiple layers to that interaction, right? It's very hard to say that all those, even if I think of an auto agent being practical, all the layers will not be managed by auto agents. Auto agents can still take care of maybe two layers, and still the final layer of, say, cross sell, upsell, final decision is still human in the loop, right? So I think that is where that oversight or evolution will keep happening, right? But there could be some lot of redundant, mundane tasks where you can truly bring in intelligence to for because if you look at 2 3 years back before generative AI came in, cognitive automation was the word that everybody came out of, right? RPA, cognitive automation is something now today is a reality because of Gen AI's power, right? Because if else loop cannot give you cognitive automation, right? It's a anything, but now it is a reality. But still, if you were to build that, it will not take care of all the interaction that are needed, right? So it's just going to be always for us, a symbiotic relationship between machine and the human mind to continue to deliver a personalized or a more enriching customer experience in any journey that we look at it.
Got it. No, and talking about responsibility, there is also, apart from the automation of it and the workforce, there is always the other aspect of it has been the blurring lines between human creativity and machine generated, right? We have seen a lot of
Mm,
lawsuits and
mm,
right, different individuals as well as organizations have put out lawsuits against large language models. What does this mean for a company like Innover who's working with large 500 organizations? Because ChatGPT is, or some of these public B2C models are, or for general use. But when it comes to leveraging, LLMs or building Gen AI for some of these top organizations, what does that mean exactly for Innover and your clients involved, and how do you kind of navigate this legally as well as ethically?
yeah. So I think this is a very good question, right? And I'll share my perspective and I'll let Amit add if he has any other points, right? So I think there will always be a moral and ethical conundrum when something new comes in and disrupts us so fast, right? And we as a partner to our customers as well as partners to all our employee, right? We have to be very careful in terms of making sure that the relationship between the AI development and human creativity, right, has to be balanced out, because and there has to be checks and balances that needs to start coming in very quickly, right? And we see it now. Everybody is already talking about it to try and make sure if there is a way for us to identify, put some governance around it, right? Because I think there are two, I think, bigger issues that which we have to be very careful about, right? Is, of course, we have seen deep fakes coming in, right? So there is a lot of those alarming content, alarming things that are happening in the social world that we all are seeing, which is happening right now from a technology capability standpoint. But on the same time, right, we are seeing organizations becoming more and more robust in terms of how they are kind of safeguarding their data, how they're trying to build more validations around how they're using the generated content and how they're getting deployed, right? So I think it is very important that that balance is maintained. And I think it will take iterations to get that balance at the right level, right? And that happens with every new technology, right? And also, one of the bigger things is this whole emergence of AI hallucination, right? And we have heard this term. It is very important that, we, if there is a issue that is created by AI generated content or some issues that happen which kind of create impact, we have to be very careful to make sure the trust does not get breached, right? Because breaching of trust not only impacts the organization but also the customer relationships and all those kind of things. So organizations we see are getting more and more careful about how they are deploying this technology, and that's where responsible, innovation is coming into play, where companies themselves are putting a lot of guardrails around how and where they're going to use it and how they're going to deploy it. And we potentially believe that as this technology truly becomes a place where it is going to have meaningful impact, the regulators and the governments will come into play. If you see the regulators and government today, they are not coming into play because this is still, I call it, an experimentation phase of the technology, right? And I think organizations are doing phenomenal job in terms of putting the right governance, risk, monitoring around how they're using it and how they're deploying it, right? But as this becomes truly a large scale impactful solution, I'm sure the regulations will start coming in from the regulatory bodies and the governments and organizations kind of tying it down, right? And that is, I think that has happened with evolution of every technology that we know historically that has become mainstream, right? So that's how at least we see this evolution. It is going to be more self-driven, for lack of better term, right now, and then of course it will be externally enforced when this really becomes a place where it is a meaningful impact, right? And Amit, I don't know if you have any other points that you wanted to add, but that's our view of how this thing kind of comes together. Kashyap.
I'll just add, going back to earlier, Kashyap, what I said about awareness, governance, and strategy. It's not a one-time done thing. It's a continuous loop. This will continue to evolve, and you need to continue to revisit it.
Got it. Got it. Thank you so much. My last question to both of you is, looking ahead, what are some of the key advancements we are expecting for generative AI? And I want to understand your perspective from, in the next 1 or 2 years, 5 years, and 10 years. What do you envision Gen AI to become? What do you envision Gen AI to be able to do, especially if things go right? And, your predictions overall.
I stay away, Kashyap, from 2 years, 5 years, is because there is a very famous saying that humans are significantly overestimate the advancement in the long run and significantly underestimated in the short run. So I don't know where it will be, but I believe generative AI is in its infancy, and we will continue to see the rate of change being exponentially higher. Having said that, we already are witnessing multimodal AI models, right? So you can interact, talk with them, right? Of course, via text. So that interactability through various channels is going to continue, continuously increase. Yeah. We talked already about the small language models, the evolution of small language models or context sensitive models is clearly on the horizon, right? Which will continue to see more traction. We also spoke about autonomous agents, right? I think in the defined context, with least human intervention, right, of how these bots can continue to do end-to-end processes or tasks, I think is again very much on the horizon. Looking a little bit far out, interactive AI, where imagine that you have a bot and you have an ecosystem of bots, and now the task delegation can happen, by the bot. So now that is something which is extremely possible in the near future. And then, of course, generative AI along with robotics, opens up significant possibilities into the future. Yeah. Overall, I stay both extremely bullish on the technology and extremely optimistic, of the contributions it can make to the overall human advancement.
Rakesh, any closing thoughts?
No, I think Amit covered it, right? For me, I think the biggest area where I think we can see significant impact in the near future is going to be our ability to take it truly to an auto agent level, right? Because I think that's where, to your point, Kashyap, what you're saying is technology will truly become a very large impact, and we can see then true value to be talked about, right? I think, and from after that, I think then it's up to our imagination. The technology does promise to be very powerful and can grow very fast.
On that note, thank you so much, Amit and Rakesh, for making the time. It was wonderful talking to you.
No, thank you, Kashyap.
Our pleasure.